Hello, my friend, and welcome back to Sleepy Shelf with Oliver. If you are hearing my voice, it means the day is finally over. The world outside may be rushing, but in here, time stands still. The night is quite peaceful tonight, isn't it? But you don't need to worry about the cold, the wind, or the endless thoughts trying to keep you awake. You are safe now, hidden away in this forgotten village. The moon is glowing, the heavy curtains are drawn, and I have a quiet tale waiting just for you. So, sink into your pillows, close your eyes, take a slow, deep breath, and let the moonlight wash the world away. Part 1. The Silver Road arrives. The road appears before you slowly, the way all the most beautiful things in this world tend to appear. Not all at once, but gently, gradually, like a whispered secret that the night has been saving just for you. It is a cobblestone road. Old, very old. The kind of old that no longer bothers to announce itself. That simply is. The way mountains are, the way the smell of rain on dry earth simply is. Each stone is rounded at its edges, worn smooth by the passage of centuries of soft footsteps and cartwheels and the unhurried hooves of horses who no longer exist anywhere but in the most peaceful corners of memory. The stones are gray in the daylight, perhaps, but it is not daylight now. Now, each stone carries upon its back a coat of the most extraordinary silver, the silver of the full moon which hangs above you, enormous and impossibly still, like a paper lantern that someone has strung between the stars and simply forgotten to take down. You stop for a moment. You simply stand and you breathe and you look up at it, the moon. It is so full tonight, so extraordinarily, quietly full. Not harsh in the way that artificial lights are harsh, not demanding the way that screens and cities and noise are demanding. The moonlight asks nothing of you. It simply falls. It falls the way snow falls, the way sleep falls, without hurry, without drifting down through the cool September air and settling across everything it touches with the softest imaginable silver weight. It settles across your shoulders. It settles across your hands, which hang loosely at your sides. It settles across the cobblestones and across the ancient hedgerows that line the road on either side, and across the tops of the great dark trees that stand beyond those hedgerows, like patient, enormous sentinels who have been standing here since before this road had a name. You take a step forward. The cobblestone makes the softest, most satisfying sound beneath your foot. A gentle, resonant tap. A small percussion in the enormous quiet of the night. And then another step and another tap, and you find yourself walking slowly, so slowly, down this silver road, deeper into wherever it is that you are going. The air here is cool, not cold, not biting, simply cool in the way that September nights in old, sheltered places are cool. A freshness that moves gently over the skin of your arms and throat, like a cloth that has been kept in a drawer beside lavender and cedar. You breathe it in, deep. You hold it for just a moment in your chest. This clean, moonlit air, this air that smells faintly of fallen leaves and distant wood smoke and something green and ancient that you cannot quite name, but that your body recognizes immediately, instinctively, as safe, as home. You let the breath go slowly, and with it, you let go of something else, something tightly held, something you have been carrying for longer than you perhaps realized. It leaves you quietly and dissolves into the night. The trees on either side of the road begin to lean inward overhead. Elm trees these, enormous ones, their trunks as wide as old chimneys, their bark deeply furrowed in long vertical lines that the moonlight traces with silver fingers. Their branches interweave above you in the most extraordinary canopy. Not a ceiling exactly, more like lacework. Like the kind of fine, dark lacework that a Victorian lady might have kept folded carefully in a box, and which, when held up to the light, reveals itself to be full of small, perfect holes through which the light comes filtering. And the moonlight comes filtering through the branches above you exactly like that, in small, luminous patches that shift and breathe as the branches sway very gently in the breeze. The breeze. Let us talk about the breeze for a moment, because it deserves attention. It comes from somewhere to the west. You can tell by the way it moves across your left cheek, the way it lifts the very ends of your hair with an almost courteous sort of tenderness. It is not a strong breeze. It is barely a breeze at all, if you want to be precise about it. It is more like the suggestion of a breeze, a slow, meandering exhale from some sleeping giant beyond the hills, carrying with it the damp smell of meadow grass and the very faintest trace of something floral, something that might once have been roses in a garden somewhere to the west, now past their bloom, but still releasing the last of their softened fragrance into the night. The elm leaves respond to it with the quietest possible sound, a rustling, a dry, papery, whispering rustle that passes through the canopy above you like a slow wave, starting somewhere to your right and moving across the road to your left, fading, returning, fading again. It is the sound of 10,000 small, sleepy conversations occurring simultaneously and meaning nothing in particular and requiring absolutely nothing from you. You let the sound wash over you. You let it pass through you the way water passes through cupped hands, touching everything, held by nothing, gone softly. And then you see it at the far end of the elm corridor, where the trees part like theater curtains. The road opens into a wider space, and in that wider space, there stands, bathed so completely in moonlight that it seems almost to generate its own pale glow from within. A village, a forgotten village. You can tell it is forgotten because of the quality of its stillness. There are towns that are asleep, and there are towns that have been forgotten, and they feel entirely different from one another. An asleep town still hums faintly with the sense of all those lives inside it, all those warm bodies and dreaming minds just behind the darkened windows. A forgotten town has a different kind of quiet, a deeper kind. The quiet of a thing that the world has simply misplaced, slipped between the pages of some enormous old book, and left there, pressed flat and perfect, while everything else rushed on ahead. This village has been misplaced, and you are so grateful for it. You stand at the edge of the elm corridor and look at it. The road widens here into something that, in daylight, might be called a lane, a broad, gentle lane of silver cobblestones that curves slightly to the right, following the line of some long-forgotten field boundary beneath the grass. On either side of the lane, the buildings begin. Cottages, most of them, built of the local stone, a warm, yellowish limestone that the moonlight transforms into something that looks very nearly like carved ivory. The rooftops are steep and old, their slates dark and slightly mossy at the eaves, their chimney stacks rising against the sky in narrow, dignified columns. No smoke rises from any chimney tonight. The fires have all been out for a very long time. The windows of the cottages are dark, but they are not empty looking. There is something about the way the moonlight falls across them, across the small, thick panes of old glass, each pane slightly warped, slightly uneven in the way that old handmade glass is always slightly warped and uneven. That makes the darkness inside them feel inhabited by something other than absence, by quiet, by rest, by the accumulated peace of all the years that have settled inside these walls and remain there undisturbed. You take a step into the lane. The cobblestone sounds beneath your foot, that soft, resonant tap, and the sound moves out ahead of you through the village and fades, absorbed by the old walls and the thick night air and the enormous, indifferent kindness of the moon. You take another step. The cool air moves across your face again, and the elm leaves whisper behind you. And somewhere very far overhead, a single cloud, thin and translucent as gauze, drifts slowly across the face of the moon, and for a moment softens its light to something even gentler. An ivory light, a pearl light, a light the color of an old page in an old book, before the cloud passes on and the silver returns, full and quiet and absolute. Your shoulders drop. Your jaw, which you had not realized was holding any tension at all, releases it now. Your hands, loose at your sides, feel heavy in the most comfortable way. Heavy the way your hand feels in a warm bath, weighted by water, belonging to that warmth entirely. You are here. You are safe. You are walking slowly through the forgotten village, and the moonlight is silver on the cobblestones beneath your feet. And there is nowhere else in the world that you need to be tonight. Nowhere at all. You stepped fully inside, and the door swung gently closed behind you. The room was small and completely unhurried. The shelves that lined its walls were crowded with everything a florist might need, and a great deal more. Bundles of dried herbs tied with twine, small bottles of tinted water, old books with their spines turned inward, clay pots in every size. The floor was flagstone, worn smooth, with a faded rug laid down the center that had once been red and was now something warmer and more complicated. Candles burned on every available surface, clustered together in groups of 3 and 5 and 7, their flames steady and generous in the still air of the room, casting everything in gold. And the flowers, they were everywhere, in buckets of water, along the floor, in jugs on the counter, in tin pails, hanging from the beams overhead. Roses and dahlias and late chrysanthemums, eucalyptus branches and sprigs of rosemary, bunches of dried poppy heads rattling gently to themselves. The whole room felt like the inside of a garden that had decided to come indoors for winter and found the arrangement entirely agreeable. You heard a sound from somewhere deeper in the shop, a soft, rhythmic snipping, the sound of scissors working through stems, and a moment later, a figure appeared through a curtain of hanging dried flowers at the back of the room. The florist was older, with a face that had settled into a kind of gentle steadiness, the way old wood does, not worn down, but worn into something more itself. She wore an apron over dark wool, its pockets sagging pleasantly with the small tools of her trade, and her hands, when she set down her scissors, were the hands of someone who spent a great deal of time among living things, careful and sure and faintly stained with green. Her gray hair was loosely pinned, several strands having made their way free over the course of the evening, and she did not appear troubled by this. She looked at you with the particular unhurried warmth of someone who is never very surprised to see someone arrive. "Come in out of the mist," she said. Her voice was low and even. the kind that made a room feel smaller in the best possible way. More contained, more sheltered. The evenings have been thick with it lately. October always keeps it close. You said something in reply, something simple, an apology perhaps for the lateness of the hour, or a word of wonder at the shop itself, and she shook her head very slightly, as though apologies were entirely unnecessary here. "There's no late here," she said, moving to the counter with the slow certainty of long habit. "The candles don't know the time, neither do the flowers particularly." She glanced at you, a small warmth at the corners of her eyes. "And neither, I think, do you. Tonight, not really." She was right, you realized. Standing here in the candlelight, surrounded by the scent of roses and the soft, living warmth of 100 small flames, the hour had ceased to matter entirely. The fog pressed against the windows. The city moved on, somewhere far off, in its usual way. But here, inside this narrow room, with its crowded shelves and patient flowers, time had slowed to something very different, to the pace of a candle burning, or a flower opening, or a long, deep breath taken without hurry. You felt your shoulders drop. The florist tilted her head gently toward an old wooden stool beside the counter. Just tilted it, the smallest gesture. And somehow, this was enough. You sat down, and the evening, like a soft blanket pulled to the chin, settled around you. Let your eyes close now, if they haven't already. The candles are burning steadily. The roses are resting in their water. The mist is outside, and you are inside, and there is nowhere at all you need to go. Rest here for a while. The florist is close by, moving quietly among her flowers. You are perfectly safe. You are perfectly warm. Sleep, when it comes, will come gently. Part 2, the candlelit shop. Breathe in slowly. Hold it for just a moment and let it go. You are still here on the worn wooden stool inside the narrow shop, and the candlelight is still moving. That constant, unhurried movement of flame that asks nothing of you except that you watch it if you like, or close your eyes if you prefer. Both are equally welcome here. The florist is nearby. The roses are resting. The fog is outside, doing whatever fog does when no one is watching it. There is nowhere else to be. Let the room come into focus around you now. Softly, the way things come clear when your eyes have had a moment to adjust, not all at once, but in pieces, each one a small and quiet gift. The shelves were the first thing you truly noticed when she had been still long enough to see them properly. They ran from floor to ceiling on every wall, built from dark timber that had deepened over the years into the color of strong tea. Their surfaces worn smooth at the edges, where countless hands had reached and rested and reached again. They were full, not cluttered, but generously, thoughtfully full, in the way of a room that has been slowly accumulated rather than deliberately arranged. Every shelf held its own small world. On the lowest ones, closest to the flagstone floor, sat the practical things. Wide-mouthed, ceramic crocks in cream and blue, their lids slightly askew. Rolls of brown paper, shallow baskets lined with burlap, holding bulbs wrapped in dry peat. Above these, the shelves grew more varied, glass terrariums of different sizes, their panes fogged softly with the breath of the small, mossy landscapes within. Tiny ferns curling toward the light of the nearest candle, a single sprig of something white and small blooming quietly in the corner of one. Beside them, porcelain vases in shapes that suggested they had each arrived from a different era in a different household. A tall, narrow one painted with blue willow branches, a squat, round one the color of old cream with a crack along its base that had been mended so carefully it was almost invisible. A pair of small ones, identical, each holding a single dried poppy head on a long pale stem. And between all of this, wherever a shelf offered a spare inch of space, there were books. They were old, all of them, leather-bound and cloth-bound, and in some cases, bound in something that had once been leather and had since softened into something more ambiguous. Their spines were lettered in gilt that had mostly faded to a warm ghost of itself. The Language of Flowers, a Practical Herbal, Observations upon the Garden at Kew, Volume 3, on the classification of the rose family. One thick volume lay open, face down as though someone had set it aside mid-page and fully intended to return. You found yourself wondering what sentence they had left unfinished. You tilted your head back very slowly. The ceiling was low and dark-beamed, and from it hung the herbs. They had been gathered into bundles, some thick as a wrist, some barely a handful, and tied with loops of rough twine, then left to dry in the warmth of the shop over what must have been many seasons. Lavender, in its dozens of shades, from deep violet to faded gray. Rosemary, its stiff gray-green spines pointing downward in neat formations. Chamomile, its tiny dried flowers, pale as old paper. Sage and thyme, and something you didn't immediately recognize. Silver-leafed, delicate, with a scent that drifted down when the candles below it moved. Sweet and faintly resinous, like a forest in late summer. The bundles swayed, almost imperceptibly, in the slow, warm currents rising from the candles, and their shadows swayed with them across the beams above, long and softly edged, as unhurried as everything else in this room. The effect of all of it together, the dark shelves, the glass terrariums holding their small green breaths, the books with their faded gilt, the hanging herbs shifting in the warmth, was of being inside something that had been slowly, lovingly layered, the way a bird layers a nest. Each addition chosen not for grandeur, but for fitness, for warmth, for the particular way it contributed to a whole that was more comfortable than any single part. You felt, with a certainty that required no analysis, that you were safe here. The florist had disappeared through the curtain of hanging dried flowers at the back of the shop, and from behind it came sounds you found yourself following easily, without effort. The soft knock of a kettle being lifted, the quiet percussion of a drawer being opened and closed, the small ceramic tap of cups being set onto a tray. The window was small but meticulously clean, and behind the glass could be seen an arrangement of wooden toys, a painted horse with real horsehair for its mane and tail, a mechanical bear that could be made to walk by turning a key in its side, a set of 9 pins, each carved and painted to represent a different character from nursery rhymes, and a Noah's Ark complete with pairs of animals so small and delicate they seemed to have been carved by fairy hands. The toys were arranged with evident care, positioned to catch what light there was, and even in the gray dawn, they possessed a certain quality of life, as if they were only waiting for the proper moment to wake and move about. Above the window, painted on a wooden sign that hung from an iron bracket, were the words, A. Bellamy, maker of fine toys and curiosities. The paint had faded somewhat over the years, but the letters remained clear, and the sign itself, though old, had been maintained with obvious care. It swung very slightly in the morning breeze, producing a faint creaking sound that mingled with the other soft noises of the awakening street. Within the shop, all was still dark. The shutters remained closed, the door locked, the interior wrapped in the particular silence that belongs to places where work is done, but where, for the moment, no work is being undertaken. The darkness held within it the shapes of many things: workbenches and shelves, tools and half-finished projects, toys in various stages of completion, all waiting, patient as the fog, for the day to properly begin. The minutes passed slowly, measured by the distant chiming of church bells. First one bell, then another, then several together, their voices rising through the fog to announce the hour. 6 o'clock. The city was waking, though not yet fully awake. The market sounds grew gradually louder. The rumble of more carts, the calls of vendors beginning to arrange their goods, the general murmur of commerce preparing to commence. And then, from the door that led to the floors above the shop, there came the sound of footsteps on wooden stairs, slow footsteps, careful and measured, descending one step at a time. Each step produced its own particular note. Some stairs creaked, others groaned softly, a few were silent. The footsteps knew these sounds, anticipated them, accepted them as familiar companions. A key turned in a lock, somewhere in the darkness, and the door at the bottom of the stairs opened. A figure appeared, barely visible, in the dim light that crept around the edges of the shutters. The figure moved with the deliberate slowness of age, not infirm exactly, but conscious of the body's limitations and unwilling to test them unnecessarily. There was a pause, a moment of stillness, and then the strike of a match. A small sound, sharp and sudden in the quiet. The match flared, and in its brief light, one could see a pair of hands holding it, old hands marked with the signs of long labor, the skin spotted and creased, the fingers slightly gnarled, but still capable. Still, sure. The hands moved the match to a lamp that stood on a small table near the door, and the lamp's wick caught, the flame spreading and steadying until it cast a warm circle of light that pushed back the darkness for several feet in all directions. In that light, more could now be seen. The hands belonged to an elderly man dressed in clothing that spoke of modest circumstances, maintained with care: dark trousers, a waistcoat of gray cloth, a white shirt with a collar that had been washed many times, and over all, a long brown apron, its pockets sagging with the weight of small tools. The man's face was gentle, deeply lined, with kind eyes that held the particular softness that comes from a lifetime of working with one's hands to create things meant to bring joy to children. This was Mr. Arthur Bellamy, and he had been making toys in this shop for longer than many people had been alive. He was 73 years old, though he rarely thought about his age except when his knees protested the climb up the stairs or his fingers grew stiff on cold mornings. He had been born in this building, had learned his trade from his father in this very workshop, and had continued that work through all the years since, creating wooden horses and painted dolls, mechanical birds and puzzle boxes, tin soldiers and miniature theaters. He stood for a moment, holding the lamp, allowing his eyes to adjust to the light and his mind to adjust to wakefulness. This moment of standing still, of simply being present in the space where he spent his days, was as much a part of his morning ritual as lighting the lamp itself. He looked around the workshop, seeing without needing to focus his attention. The familiar shapes, the known locations of tools and materials, the comforting presence of his life's work. Mr. Weatherby noticed it too. "Beautiful evening," he remarked, pausing at the door with his wrapped package under his arm. "Makes one grateful for windows facing west." Halbrook agreed. Every sunset is a gift, but winter sunsets seem especially fine. Perhaps because they're so brief. Mr. Weatherby nodded and took his leave, the bell chiming his departure. Mr. Halbrook watched him walk past the window, his figure briefly silhouetted against the golden light. And then he was gone, disappeared around the corner. The shop fell quiet. Mr. Halbrook stood for a moment, simply listening to the silence. It was not absolute, this silence. He could hear the settling of the building around him, the distant sound of cartwheels on cobblestones, the faint ringing of church bells marking the hour. But these sounds only deepened the quiet rather than breaking it, the way a single drop of ink makes water more transparent by giving it something to be compared against. He moved to the window and looked out at the street. The sunset was intensifying, the amber deepening to copper and gold. The buildings across the way were transformed by it, their ordinary brick and timber facades becoming something precious, something worth pausing to admire. A few people passed by, hurrying home before full darkness fell. A man with a walking stick, a woman with a basket, 2 children running ahead of their mother, their voices carrying in the cold air. All of them were touched by the sunset light, all of them briefly beautiful. In that particular way, that early evening makes everyone beautiful. Mr. Halbrook turned away from the window and began the process of closing the shop for customers, though not yet for the day. He went to the door and turned the sign that hung there from open to closed. He drew the bolt, not locking it entirely. He might still need to step out, but securing it enough that no one would casually enter expecting to make a purchase. Then he moved through the shop, beginning the evening tasks. Some of the candles that had been burning during the day needed trimming or replacing. He attended to this with his customary care, ensuring that each flame was healthy, each wick at the proper length. As he worked, the light outside continued to change. The copper and gold were fading now, giving way to softer shades of rose and lavender. The sky above the rooftops was turning that particular shade of blue that exists only at dusk. Not quite day, not quite night, but something suspended between the two. When the candles were all properly tended, Mr. Halbrook made his way to the workshop. This was his favorite time to work here, in the evening, when the pressure of potential customers was gone, and he could focus entirely on his craft without interruption. He had left a pot of beeswax melting slowly on the stove earlier in the day, and now he checked its progress. The wax was perfectly liquid, golden and fragrant. He would use it to make some of the smaller votives that were popular this time of year. People liked to cluster them together, creating pools of light on tables and windowsills. But before beginning that work, he needed tea. This had become a ritual over the years, this evening tea in the workshop. It marked the transition from the day's business to the evening's craftsmanship, from work done for others to work done for its own sake. The tea itself was nothing special, the same blend he drank in the morning, prepared in the same way, but the context transformed it, made it taste different somehow. Evening tea in the workshop, with the sunset fading outside and the candles beginning to glow more brightly as the natural light failed. This was one of the small pleasures of his life. He prepared the tea on the small spirit stove he kept in the corner of the workshop, separate from the larger stove used for melting wax. The kettle was already filled with water from the morning, and it heated quickly. beginning its quiet song as the water approached boiling. While he waited, Mr. Halbrook tidied his workspace. He arranged his tools with precision. The dipping rods, the molds, the cutting tools, the measuring implements. Each had its place, and each was returned to that place at the end of every work session. This order was not merely aesthetic, it was practical. A chandler's shop, with its open flames and hot wax, was no place for carelessness. Tools left lying about could be knocked over, could cause accidents. Better by far to maintain rigorous organization. The kettle began to whistle softly. Mr. Halbrook removed it from the heat and prepared his tea, watching as the hot water turned the color of the leaves as steam rose and dispersed. He poured the tea into his cup, a simple earthenware thing, chipped at the rim but still perfectly serviceable, and carried it to his workbench. He set it down carefully, away from his work area but close enough to reach easily, and stood for a moment watching the steam rise in thin, wandering tendrils. The workshop was warm from the stove, and the contrast between the warm air and the cold tea created visible currents, patterns of movement that were there and then gone, impossible to capture or hold. Through the high window, the last of the sunset was visible, just a band of pale gold now, fading even as he watched. Soon, it would be gone entirely, and the night would be complete. Mr. Halbrook sipped his tea. It was too hot still, and he had to be careful not to burn his mouth, but the warmth of it spreading through him was welcome. He felt the tension of the day, such as it was. His days were not particularly tense, beginning to ease from his shoulders and back. This was peace, he thought. This moment, this particular configuration of elements, warm workshop, cooling tea, fading light, the scent of beeswax, and the promise of work to come. This was what he had built his life around. This was what he returned to every evening. Not excitement or novelty or surprise, but this steady, reliable comfort. He thought about the people who had come into his shop that day, the clerk ordering candles for his employer's celebration, the students buying tapers for their studies, the elderly woman purchasing her memorial votive. Each of them had their own lives, their own stories, their own reasons for needing light, and he was privileged to provide that light, to be a small but necessary part of their days. There was satisfaction in that, deep satisfaction, the kind that didn't announce itself loudly, but rather settled in quietly, like snow accumulating on a winter night. The street outside had grown quieter now. The rush of people heading home had passed. Occasionally, someone would still walk by, their footsteps echoing on the cobblestones, but these were individual travelers now, not the stream that had flowed past in the earlier evening. Mr. Halbrook finished his tea and set the cup aside. Time to begin the evening's work. He had votives to make, and the wax was at the perfect temperature. He worked slowly, methodically, pouring the liquid wax into small molds, setting wicks with steady hands. The process was almost automatic after so many years, requiring only a portion of his conscious attention. The rest of his mind was free to drift, to think, to simply be. The workshop settled around him like a familiar coat. The candles burning on the shelves cast their warm glow. The stove radiated its steady heat. The tools lay in their appointed places, ready for use. Everything was as it should be, as it had been, as it would be tomorrow and the day after. Outside, night was falling fully now. The sky had darkened from lavender to deep blue to something approaching black. One by one, lamps were being lit in windows across the city, little points of light appearing in the darkness, each one representing a household, a family, people settling in for the evening. Mr. Halbrook poured another mold, watching as the golden wax filled the small cavity as the wick centered itself in the liquid. When this wax cooled and hardened, it would be a candle, a small one, true, but complete, capable of giving light, of providing warmth, of serving its purpose. He poured another and another, working in steady rhythm. The workshop was filled with the quiet sounds of his craft, the soft glug of wax pouring, the gentle clink of molds being set aside, the occasional crackle from the stove. Above him, visible if he chose to look up, the high shelf could just be seen through the workshop doorway. And on that shelf, though he could not see it from this angle, the pale candle stood in its place, keeping its vigil, holding its mystery. But Mr. Halbrook did not look up. He was focused on his work, on the task at hand, on the creation of small lights that would burn for a few hours and then be gone, replaced by others, in the endless cycle that was his life and his craft. The evening deepened, the votives multiplied, and in the warm, wax-scented workshop, an old man's hands continued their familiar work, creating light against the darkness, one small candle at a time. Part 8, A Visitor from Long Ago. The following evening brought with it a change in the weather. The clear, cold days had given way to something softer, a low ceiling of clouds that held the warmth close to the earth and promised snow before the week was out. The air had that particular thickness to it, that sense of expectancy that comes before the first real snowfall of winter. Mr. Halbrook had spent the day in quiet productivity. His hands had shaped candles, his mind had wandered its familiar paths, and the hours had passed with the gentle steadiness that characterized all his days. Now, as evening approached, he was in the workshop, cleaning his tools in preparation for tomorrow's work. The bell above the shop door rang, clear and bright in the gathering dusk. Mr. Halbrook set down the tool he had been wiping and made his way to the front of the shop. Through the doorway, he could see a figure standing just inside the entrance, and something about the way the person stood, straight-backed despite evident age, with a stillness that suggested patience and dignity, made him pause for just a moment before stepping forward. As he entered the shop proper, the visitor turned toward him, and Mr. Halbrook found himself looking at a man who might have been anywhere from 70 to 80 years of age. He was tall, or had been before time had begun its slow work of drawing him earthward. His hair was white, his face deeply lined, but his eyes were clear and bright, and they held an expression that Mr. Halbrook could not quite name. Recognition, nostalgia, something gentler than sadness, but touched by the same awareness of time's passage. "Good evening," Mr. Halbrook said, his voice warm but curious. There was something familiar about this man, though he could not immediately place him. "Good evening, Mr. Halbrook," the visitor replied, and his voice, too, carried that quality of age tempered by vitality. "I wonder if you might have a few minutes to speak with an old customer. I promise not to keep you long from your work." "Of course," Mr. Halbrook said. "Please, sit." He gestured to the chair near the counter, the same chair where Mrs. Ashworth had sat for tea several days before. The visitor settled himself carefully, the way elderly people do when their joints have begun to protest sudden movements. Mr. Halbrook took up his position on the stool behind the counter, waiting with the patience of one who has learned that some things cannot be rushed. The visitor looked around the shop, his gaze moving from shelf to shelf, candle to candle, taking in every detail as though committing it to memory. Or perhaps, Mr. Halbrook thought, as though comparing what he saw now to what he remembered from before. "It hasn't changed," the visitor said finally, and there was wonder in his voice. All these years, and it's exactly as I remember it. The same shelves, the same arrangement, even the smell, beeswax and tallow, and he paused, breathing deeply, and something else. Time, perhaps, or constancy. It's comforting in a world that changes so rapidly. You've been here before then, Mr. Halbrook said gently, still trying to place the man's face, still searching his memory for the connection he was certain existed. Oh yes, the visitor said, his eyes now fixed on Mr. Halbrook's face. Though it's been many years, 60 years in fact, since I last stood in the shop. I was a boy of 9. You would have been, what, 13? 14? Understanding came slowly, like dawn breaking on a cloudy morning. Mr. Halbrook looked more closely at the face before him, trying to see past the lines and years to the features beneath. And then, quite suddenly, he saw it. The shape of the eyes, the particular way the mouth curved when speaking. William Ashford, he said softly. Sarah's brother, the visitor. William smiled, and in that smile, Mr. Halbrook saw the boy he had known 6 decades ago, the younger brother of the girl he had loved and lost. I wasn't certain you would remember me. I was just a child when you knew our family. I remember, Mr. Halbrook said, and found that his voice had grown thick with emotion. You were always underfoot, as I recall, following Sarah and me on our walks, asking questions, making a general nuisance of yourself. William laughed, a sound that held both joy and sorrow. I worshipped you both, you know. You were so grown up, so serious. And Sarah was the kindest person I ever knew. When she died, he paused, collecting himself. Well, it's been 60 years, and I still miss her. As do I, Mr. Halbrook said quietly. They sat in silence for a moment, 2 old men remembering a girl who had been young and vibrant and full of life, whose absence had shaped both their lives in ways large and small. I left York not long after Sarah's death, William said eventually. My parents couldn't bear to stay. Too many memories, too much pain. We moved to Liverpool, and I've lived there ever since. Built a life, raised a family, grew old. He smiled. The usual progression. And what brings you back to York after all these years? Mr. Halbrook asked. My granddaughter's being married here on Saturday, William replied. Her fiancé is from York, and they wanted to be married in the cathedral. I arrived 2 days ago, and I've been walking the old streets, seeing what's changed and what hasn't, and I found myself drawn here, to this shop. I had to see if it was still here, if you were still here. Still here, Mr. Halbrook confirmed. Still making candles, still keeping the same hours. I suppose I've become something of a fixture, like the buildings themselves. There's honor in constancy, William said. The world needs more of it, I think. Halbrook inclined his head in acknowledgement of the compliment. Then, surprising himself, he asked, Would you like some tea? I was just about to make some for myself. William's face brightened. I would like that very much. Mr. Halbrook prepared the tea as he had for Mrs. Ashworth, with the same care, the same attention to small details. When he returned to the shop, William was standing, looking up at the high shelves with an expression of deep concentration. Mr. Halbrook, he said slowly, that candle there, the pale one on the high shelf. May I ask about it? Halbrook felt a small jolt of surprise. He handed William his tea and then looked up at the candle in question. It's been there for many years. he said carefully. "Why do you ask?" William was quiet for a long moment, his eyes fixed on the candle. When he spoke, his voice was soft, almost reverent. "Because I remember it, or one very like it. Sarah had a candle. You gave it to her, do you remember? It was for her 17th birthday. You were so nervous wrapping it, presenting it to her. It was pale beeswax, simple and beautiful. She loved it. Hello, midnight companions. Tonight, I'd like to invite you into the quietest corner of the night. Together, we'll wander through a distant Victorian train station, softly lit and gently humming with the last breaths of resting locomotives. In the company of a kind night porter, this peaceful story will help your mind unwind, your body soften, and your thoughts drift toward sleep. Take a slow, easy breath, let your eyes grow heavy, and welcome the night with me." The clock somewhere in the distance has just finished its long, low counting. 12 strokes, each one softer than the last, dissolving into the cold night air like breath on a winter window. The last echo fades, and what remains is silence. Not the hard silence of empty spaces, but the deep, padded silence of a world that has simply decided to rest. You are here now. You have arrived. The station opens before you. Slowly, the way a dream opens. Not all at once, but in layers, each one settling gently over the last. There is the smell first. Coal smoke and iron, cold stone and something sweetly floral. Perhaps from a window box somewhere above the arching entrance, a last brave cluster of late-season roses, refusing to acknowledge the lateness of the hour. The smell is old and kind. It asks nothing of you. It simply surrounds you, the way a favorite coat surrounds you when you lift it from its hook on a winter evening. Your footsteps slow as you pass beneath the great entrance arch. The arch is iron and stone, impossibly tall, dressed along its crown in scroll work that the lamplight cannot quite fully illuminate. There are suggestions of leaves up there, and perhaps birds, half-seen shapes that may be flowers or faces or clouds, all softened by decades of soot and weather into something beautifully indistinct. You don't need to see it clearly. It is enough to know it is there above you, solid and patient, holding the roof of the world up just so, the way it has for more years than either of you can count. Beneath it, you step onto the platform. The platform stretches away on both sides, its stone flags worn smooth and pale, polished by the passing of 10,000 journeys, into something almost luminous. The gas lamps stand in a long row, each one casting its own small, warm kingdom of amber light. And between each lamp, soft shadows pool and breathe. The shadows do not feel dark here. They feel restful, the way shadows in a beloved room feel restful, familiar, gentle, simply the absence of something that was never needed. To your left and to your right, the locomotives sleep. There are 2 of them on the near tracks, great iron creatures settled into stillness, their boilers cooling now, ticking very softly in the deep quiet, the way a cast iron stove ticks after the last log has been laid. From one, a long exhalation of pale steam drifts upward and sideways, moving slowly across the lamplight, through the cold air, unfurling as it rises until it becomes nothing, or rather, until it becomes part of the air itself, indistinguishable, released. You watch it go. There is no hurry. There is nowhere to be except exactly here. The steam drifts and thins and vanishes The station holds its breath. Your own breathing, you notice, has grown slower. It seems to have taken its rhythm from the station, from the long, unhurried intervals between sounds, the faint tick of cooling iron, the distant murmur of something, a sleeping pigeon perhaps, shifting in the ironwork far above, the soft groan of a timber somewhere in the old station master's office, the building settling into the night the way old buildings do, flexing and relaxing, breathing in their own patient way. You set your bag down, not because you must, but because it seems right. The bag belongs on the pale stone floor of this platform. At this hour, in this pool of amber lamplight, it has arrived where it was always going. So, perhaps, have you. Your eyes move along the platform, taking it in without urgency. The wooden benches with their curved iron legs, empty now, the seats worn smooth and dark with use. The large station clock high on the far wall, its face cream and steady, its hands showing the few minutes past midnight, moving so slowly that watching them requires a particular kind of patience you find yourself, just now, entirely willing to offer. The clock does not race. The clock does not urge. The clock simply marks the passage of moments with the same unhurried grace it has always used and will always use. Time here is not something that runs out. Time here is simply something that flows very slowly, like a broad river at the end of a long valley, wide and deep and in no particular hurry to reach the sea. A door opens somewhere at the far end of the platform. The sound it makes is the most comfortable sound imaginable. A soft wooden creak, a brass latch settling, a whisper of warmer air escaping from some interior room into the cool night. Then footsteps, not quick, purposeful footsteps. The footsteps of someone with an errand to complete, a task to finish before bed. These footsteps are something else entirely. They are the footsteps of someone who belongs here, in the same way that the lamps belong here, and the ironwork, and the sleeping locomotives. Each footfall is unhurried, evenly spaced, falling on the pale stone with a soft, satisfying weight. A lantern swings gently in the distance. Its light is warmer than the gas lamps, a deeper gold, almost amber, almost honey, and it moves with the gentle rhythm of the walking figure who carries it. As the figure draws closer, the light begins to resolve him. A man of middle age and comfortable bearing, dressed in the deep navy of a station porter's coat, its brass buttons each catching and returning the lantern light with a small, warm wink. His cap sits level and easy on his head. His scarf, a dark wool affair wound once around the neck, gives him the look of someone who has made sensible peace with the coldness of the world. He walks as though he has all the time that has ever existed, because here he does. As he reaches you, he lifts the lantern just slightly, not to examine you, not to assess or question, simply to see you properly, the way a person raises a lantern to read a welcome sign. And the expression on his face as the light falls upon you is one you have perhaps not seen in some time, but which you recognize entirely. The expression of someone genuinely glad to find you here, not surprised, not hurried, simply, warmly glad. He smiles. It is not a large smile, not the theatrical smile of someone performing welcome. It is a quiet smile, the kind that lives in the eyes as much as the mouth, the kind that takes a moment to arrive and stays once it has. The lines beside his eyes deepen very slightly. The lantern swings once, then settles. "Good evening," he says. His voice is low and even, pitched for the quietness of this hour. Not a whisper, but something adjacent to it, something that understands the silence around it and chooses not to disturb it overmuch. Each word is given its full weight and then released, the way he might set a warm cup down on a wooden table, gently, without hurry, meaning it, or perhaps, he continues with the smallest tilt of his head, good midnight would be more accurate. You find that you are smiling too. "I wasn't sure," you hear yourself say, and your own voice sounds softer here, easier, as though this place has already begun to do its quiet work on you, whether anyone would still be about at this hour. He considers this with the air of someone who has all the time needed to consider anything. The lantern sways very slightly in the draft from some far corner of the station. "Someone is always about," he says at last. "The station doesn't sleep. Not entirely. It rests. It breathes. There is a difference." He glances down the long platform toward the two great locomotives standing in their quiet repose, the steam still drifting from one in long, slow veils. Like them, engines at rest are not engines stopped. There is still warmth in the iron, still life. He looks back at you. You've had a long journey. It is not a question, but you nod, because it is true, not only of tonight, not only of the miles that brought you to this platform, but of something larger and less easily named, the kind of long that accumulates slowly, the way dust accumulates on a windowsill, until one day you look up and wonder when the light grew so dim. He nods too, as though he understands all of this without needing to hear it. "Then you are in exactly the right place," he says simply. And you find, standing here beneath the great iron arch, in the amber lamplight, with the steam drifting slowly upward into the cold and quiet dark, that this is precisely, completely true. You are in exactly the right place. The clock on the far wall marks another slow minute. The station breathes, and somewhere, distantly, a door opens onto a room where the firelight is warm, and the chairs are deep, and the night is long, and nothing is required of you at all. The door he opens for you is small and set deep into the station wall, framed in dark painted timber that has swelled and settled over many winters into a perfect, particular fit. The kind of fit that requires no key, no latch lifting, only the gentle press of a familiar hand. He presses his, and the door opens, and the warmth comes out to meet you like something alive. You step inside. The room is not large. It does not need to be. Its dimensions are precisely what they should be. Wide enough for 2 armchairs before a hearth. Long enough for a counter along one wall. Low enough in the ceiling that the lamplight reaches every corner, without effort, filling the room the way warm water fills a cupped palm. Completely, easily, all the way to the edges. The ceiling is dark timber, crossed by beams that have blackened gently over decades of coal smoke and pipe smoke and lamp smoke, and the walls are paneled to shoulder height in the same dark wood, smooth and close-grained, polished by the incidental touch of passing hands until they hold a quiet gleam. The stove stands against the near wall. It is a small cast iron thing, squat and serious. Its door set with a mica window through which the fire inside can be seen burning in long, slow pulses amber deepening to orange, orange to a brief and beautiful red at its heart, then settling again. The coals shift once as you enter, a tiny subsidence, a private rearrangement, and a small shower of sparks drifts upward and vanishes behind the glass. The heat the stove gives off is the best possible kind, not aggressive, not dry, but gentle and pervasive, filling the room from the floor upward, loosening the cold from your shoulders, the way a long breath loosens tension from the chest. You stand before it for a moment. Your hands, you notice, have unclenched. "Sit, please," the night porter says, setting his lantern on its hook by the door, where it joins 3 others already hanging, all lit, all swaying very slightly from the disturbance of your entrance. Their combined light making the room flicker once, warmly, before settling. He gestures toward the nearer of the 2 armchairs, a deep, tufted thing, upholstered in a fabric that was once perhaps burgundy and has faded over many comfortable years to something closer to the color of dried rose petals, a color that has no precise name but feels immediately and entirely right. You sit. The chair receives you the way a good chair always does, with a small sigh of leather and horsehair, a settling, an accommodation as though it has been waiting in precisely this configuration for precisely you at precisely this hour. Your back finds the curve of the backrest. Your arms find the arms. Your feet, almost of their own will, move closer to the warmth of the stove. You could sleep here. You understand that now, with a clarity that is itself restful. You could sleep here very easily and very well. The night porter moves to the counter. The counter runs the full length of the opposite wall, dark wood polished to the same quiet gleam as the paneling, its surface bearing the collected evidence of a long and careful working life. At the far end, a row of leather-bound ledgers stands in perfect alignment, their spines stamped in faded gilt, years and routes, and the names of lines that once carried the world from one side of the country to the other. Beside them, a sheaf of timetables, thick cream-colored paper, folded with precision and stacked with the patient tidiness of someone who knows exactly where everything is and has no need to prove it. A magnifying glass on a brass handle, a pen lying at rest beside an open inkwell, its nib still faintly dark. A letter lies half finished on the blotter, the pen set beside it with the particular neatness of someone who means to come back. But the armchair by the fire, that is where we are. It is a deep chair, a chair of serious and committed softness, upholstered in a green that was once quite vivid and has since mellowed into something richer and more restful, the color of old moss, of riverbank shadows. The arms are worn at the edges where hands have rested 1,000 times. The cushions have shaped themselves over years and years into something very close to a human form, which means they receive you now with an almost uncanny attentiveness, as though they have been expecting you specifically. Beside the chair, a small table holds a cup of tea. It has been there long enough that the steam rising from it is very gentle now, barely a thread of silver in the warm air, curling and dissolving before it has gone more than a few inches upward. The tea is the color of amber, very dark, the sort of tea that has had time to think. A small spoon rests in the saucer. A single cube of sugar sits beside it, never used. The fireplace is directly opposite. The fire inside it is not a roaring thing. It has moved past that stage of the evening and settled into something more considered, a deep bed of orange and crimson coals beneath a modest flame that leans now one way, now another, as the draft shifts. It makes no great sound, only a low, occasional ticking, and now and then a small collapse of coal that sends a brief cascade of sparks upward into the flue, bright and gone in an instant, like a thought that arrives fully formed and then slips away before it can be caught. The mantelpiece above it is dark marble, and upon it a carriage clock whose ticking is almost imperceptible from the armchair, a small bronze figure of a stag, and 2 candlesticks, unlit, their wax cold and ivory. On either side of the fireplace, bookshelves reach from floor to ceiling. The books upon them are old friends. They are not arranged for show. They are arranged the way books arrange themselves when they are actually read, by association, by feeling, by the obscure logic of a mind that knew exactly why this volume wanted to stand beside that one. Their spines are every shade of brown and green and burgundy, some lettered in gold that has worn to a whisper, some with no lettering at all. And the smell, that particular smell, which is very nearly the smell of the room itself, old paper and leather, and the faint ghost of pipe tobacco that has seeped so completely into the curtains, and the plaster and the wood, that no amount of airing will ever entirely remove it, nor would anyone wish it to. Beneath that, the dry mineral warmth of the coal fire. Beneath that, something fainter still. Beeswax, perhaps, from the floor polish, or the faint sweetness of the applewood that was added to the grate earlier in the evening and has since burned away entirely, leaving only the memory of its scent drifting among the warmer ones. The curtains at the window are drawn, mostly, not entirely. There is a gap of perhaps 2 inches between them, where they fail to meet at the center, and through this gap, if you were to look, though there is no reason at all to move or turn or do anything but remain exactly as you are, you would see the glass of the window itself, and beyond it, the square, and beyond that, nothing but a darkness that is deepening by the minute. The curtains are heavy velvet. They are the color of dried mulberry, a deep reddish purple that drinks the firelight and gives almost none of it back. They are so thick that when you stand near them, you can feel the cold of the glass radiating from behind them. And yet here, in the chair, that cold is entirely theoretical. Here, there is only warmth. Somewhere very far away, further than the square, further than the street, perhaps as far as the river, a low sound moves through the evening air, a rumble, long and slow and enormous, not sharp, not violent, the kind of sound that begins before you are quite certain you have heard it and ends after you have already begun to forget it. The sound of something immense shifting in the sky overhead as the very atmosphere of the city turns itself over and prepares. The carriage clock ticks. The fire breathes. And then, just as the last light in the square below fades to nothing, the first drops of rain arrive. Heavy, deliberate drops, each one landing against the thick glass of the study window with a sound like a fingertip pressing gently, asking to be let in. Part 2. The fire is lit and the rain begins in earnest. Stay where you are. There is no need to move, no need to do anything at all, except allow yourself to sink a little deeper into the chair, to feel the soft resistance of it giving way beneath you, degree by degree, the way the last of the evening's tension releases itself, not all at once, but gradually, like a long, slow exhale that you did not know you had been holding. The rain has started. Let that settle over you like a blanket. The rain has started, and it means what it has always meant. that the night has officially closed around this small, warm room, that the boundary between inside and outside has become something total and definitive, that whatever lies beyond these walls and these heavy velvet curtains is now entirely separate from us. We are in here. Everything else is out there. And the rain falls between those two worlds like a curtain of its own. Continuous, unbroken, absolute. Listen to it. In the very first moments, it is arriving in waves, not yet fully steady, still making up its mind about its own rhythm, the way rain does at the very beginning of a long night of rain. A flurry of drops against the glass, then a pause of perhaps 2 seconds, then more. More drops now, heavier ones, the kind that carry real weight, that strike the window not with a tap, but with a press, a fullness, a satisfying and complete sound that lands somewhere behind the sternum and stays there. And now, as you listen, do not try to count the drops. Simply let them arrive. Let them accumulate the way they are accumulating against the glass, each one adding itself to the sound until the sound becomes less like individual drops and more like a continuous texture, a fabric of noise that is somehow both complex and deeply, deeply simple. There is the higher note of the rain striking the glass directly. There is the lower, rounder sound of it hitting the stone ledge of the windowsill. There is the rushing, channeled sound of it finding the drain pipe at the corner of the house and descending in a contained stream. That particular liquid murmur that is steadier and more musical than the rain itself. And beneath all of it, beneath and behind and inside all of it, the cobblestones of the square below are receiving the rain in the way that wet stone receives things. Quietly, with a kind of deep absorption, darkening further, sending up the clean and ancient smell of wet London stone that rises even now through the gap in the curtains and mingles with the warmth of the room. But the fire needs attention. In the armchair, we are aware of it. The fire has burned low while the evening gathered itself outside. The coals are still warm, still holding a faint orange at their hearts. But the flame has gone, and the room has begun to feel it, just at the edges, just enough. The air near the window is the first to cool. It seeps inward, slowly, respectfully, as though it does not wish to intrude. It is time to build the fire up properly. There is something deeply, almost ceremonially satisfying about this, about the act of attending to a fire on a rainy night. It is one of the oldest things a person can do, and the body knows it, even before the mind is caught up. There is a box of kindling on the hearth, thin, dry sticks of wood. Pine, perhaps, split very fine, the palest straw color where they were cut. They have been sitting beside the fire all day and are warm already, warm and dry in the particular way that makes them almost eager. Beside them, a small coal scuttle, and beside that, a brass box whose hinged lid opens on a supply of long matches, the proper kind, the Victorian kind, with a thick red head and a long pale stem of pine. The first match is taken out with care. It is held for a moment, just a moment, between two fingers, the cold, smooth stem of it, the dense little head. Then it is drawn along the side of the brass striker at the edge of the box, a single deliberate stroke, and the sound of it, that brief, decisive rasp, cuts cleanly through the sound of the rain, bright and sharp and immediate, a sound that belongs entirely to this single second and no other. And then the flame. It blooms at the tip of the match with a tiny, surprised hiss, a quick flare of orange and blue that steadies itself within a heartbeat into a small, composed, upright flame. It leans slightly in the draft from the chimney. It casts a circle of warm light no larger than a cupped hand, but that circle of light is enough to illuminate the underside of the mantelpiece, the small bronze stag, the face of the carriage clock. The clock reads 20 minutes past 9. The kindling is placed with patience, not hurriedly, not carelessly. 2 or 3 sticks at first, arranged loosely over the remaining coals, with enough space between them for the air to move freely. The match is lowered to the driest, finest pieces, and the flame touches them with a kind of gentleness. For a moment, nothing. The blizzard came on quickly, the way the worst storms always do. 1 hour ago, the sky was merely gray and heavy and full of the particular anticipation that winter carries in its belly. And then the wind shifted. You felt it change against your face like a held breath finally released. And the snow began to fall. Not gently, not the soft, drifting flakes of greeting cards and nursery windows. This snow fell sideways. This snow fell with intention. Now the wind moves through the trees in great, rolling waves. You hear it before it reaches you. A low building moan rising up somewhere far off in the dark woods, growing and growing until it becomes a roar, shaking the pine branches overhead so that cascades of white powder fall from them like small cold curtains. You bow your head into it. You keep walking. There is a certain kind of peace that lives on the other side of effort, and your body has found it. A quiet, animal steadiness, a warmth that lives deep in your chest and your thighs, and the solid rhythm of your feet. The forest is not frightening. It is only large and old and indifferent in the way that all truly old things eventually become. The oaks and beeches and silent pines have seen 1,000 storms like this one, and they will see 1,000 more, and they hold their ground with a patience that is almost comforting. You are small beneath them, but you are not alone in your smallness. The wind gusts again, fierce and long, pressing against you like a great invisible hand. And then something changes. You stop walking. You lift your face into the storm. There, carried on the very edge of the freezing air, threading itself through the raw, cold smell of snow and pine bark and frozen earth. Something else. Something that should not be here in this white wilderness, and yet is. Something warm. Wood smoke. You breathe in again, slowly, carefully, as though the scent might be startled away. And yes, there it is, rich and dark and familiar, the unmistakable smell of good wood, burning low in a deep hearth, oak, perhaps, or applewood, carrying that faint sweetness that only real wood holds. Your chest loosens around it. Something in your shoulders, some tightness you had not noticed carrying, eases very slightly. And beneath the wood smoke, something else again, something stranger and sweeter, golden and floral and ancient, the way a memory from childhood sometimes surfaces without warning from somewhere you had forgotten entirely. Honey, warm honey, and beeswax, and something faintly herbal beneath it. Lavender, perhaps, or dried thyme, the scent of a place that has been lived in gently and for a very long time. The scent of care. You turn toward it. The smell is faint, directional, carried on a brief lull between gusts. Your boots find their rhythm again, and you move through the trees, following nothing more solid than a scent, trusting the way animals trust. completely and without analysis. The forest thins slightly, and then, between two enormous snow-draped pines, you see it. A light, not cold light, not the blue-white light of moon on snow, or the sharp flicker of something uncertain. This light is amber, deep, rich, golden amber, the color of honey held up to the sun, the color of candle flame seen through thick old glass. It pulses very slightly, alive the way only firelight is truly alive. And it comes from two low, broad windows set into something dark and solid and immovable in the white, swirling chaos of the storm. You take 3 more steps. The cottage emerges from the snowfall the way certainties sometimes emerge from confusion, gradually and then all at once. It is a low, stout building, built from logs so thick and dark with age that they seem to have grown here rather than been placed. The roof is buried under 1.5 feet of snow, the eaves hanging low and heavy, and from the wide stone chimney at the far end, a column of pale wood smoke rises and is immediately torn sideways by the wind. Neat stacks of split firewood run the length of one wall, sheltered beneath a low wooden overhang, and even from here, you can see the reassuring abundance of it. Enough wood for many weeks of deep winter. Enough for a long, unhurried stay. The windows glow. You stand and look at them for a moment. Just a moment before walking forward. Through the thick, slightly wavy glass, the light shifts and breathes in that slow, irregular way that only a real fire makes, and the amber of it falls across the snow outside in warm pools that seem almost to push the darkness back. A shadow moves inside, slow, unhurried, someone crossing the room with the steady ease of a person at home in their own warmth. You walk to the door. It is a massive thing, heavy planked oak, iron hinged, with a handle worn smooth by generations of hands. You stand before it for one moment, the wind screaming now behind you, flinging needles of ice against the back of your neck, pressing at you as though trying to reclaim you for the cold. You lift the latch. The door opens on a breath of heat so immediate and complete that for a second you cannot move. Warm air pouring out to meet you, scented with wood smoke and honey, and something baking slowly, deeply, something sweet and starchy and impossibly comforting. The light washes over the snow at your feet in a wide golden fan. You step inside, you turn, and you close the door. The sound of it closing is the most satisfying sound you have heard in a very long time. A deep, resonant, final thud. The iron latch dropping home with a solid click that seems to echo for a moment in the sudden, extraordinary quiet. The storm, all that roaring, flinging, howling white chaos, is simply gone. Gone as though it never was. Gone as though the world on the other side of that thick old door is nothing more than a story you half remember from somewhere, its edges already beginning to soften. You stand very still. The warmth settles over you like a hand. From somewhere deeper in the cottage, a fire crackles, low and steady and completely unhurried. The amber light moves gently across old wooden walls and the low beamed ceiling. The cold is leaving your cheeks, your fingers, the tip of your nose, slowly, gradually, like ice at the edge of a warming stream. You are inside now. You are warm. Let your breathing slow. Part 2, the golden hearth. Stay here with me a little longer. Let the weight of your body settle further into the warmth. Notice how your breathing has already begun to slow. Just a little, just enough. Let it slow a little more. There is no rush inside these walls. Time moves differently here. It moves the way honey moves, thick and golden, and in no particular hurry to be anywhere at all. You are still standing just inside the door, and now, at last, you allow yourself to look. The room is not large. That is the first thing you understand about it, and the understanding is immediately, profoundly. It is the size of a room that can be fully known, a room without hidden distances or cold, unlit corners, a room that holds its warmth because it has been built with the specific intention of holding it. The ceiling is low, crossed by 3 great beams of dark timber, each one smoothed and burnished by decades of firelight and wood smoke, until they glow faintly amber along their lower edges. The walls are the same aged log as the exterior, fitted so closely together that no draft could find its way between them, and over the years, they have taken on a deep, warm color, the color of strong tea, of dark caramel, of the inside of something old and well-loved and completely at rest. The floor beneath your boots is wide planked oak, worn smooth and dark in the paths between furniture, lighter in the places less traveled. It is the floor of a room that has been lived in faithfully, and it creaks very softly, just once, beneath your first tentative step inward. But the fireplace. The fireplace commands the far wall entirely. It is a massive thing, built from river stone, rounded and gray, and fitted together with a precision that speaks of a craftsman who understood that a fireplace is not merely functional, but is the very soul of a room. The mantelpiece above it is a single slab of dark oak, broad as a man's outstretched arms, and along it sit a row of quiet objects. A few beeswax candles burn to soft, generous pools of wax. A dark glass jar holding a spray of dried lavender. A small wooden clock whose tick is so slow and steady it has long since merged with the silence. The firebox itself is enormous, deep-set and generous, and inside it, 3 great logs burn with the unhurried confidence of things that have been alight for many hours, and intend to remain so for many more. The flames are not frantic. They are tall and low at once, deep orange at their base, where the coals glow with that particular ferocious red that good dry hardwood makes, shifting upward through amber and pale gold to the faintest blue at their very tips, where the heat is so complete it becomes almost invisible. They move together in a slow, collaborative rhythm, leaning slightly, swaying, folding against one another, separating. Watching them is like watching something breathe. The heat that radiates from this fireplace is not the sharp, aggressive heat of something newly lit. It is a settled, heavy, ancient heat, the kind that has had time to sink into the stone and the mortar and the floor itself, so that the warmth comes not only from the flames before you, but from the very room around you. It crosses the floorboards in long, invisible waves and finds you where you stand, pressing against your cold cheeks, your cold hands, the tip of your nose. You feel it on your eyelids. You feel it in your sternum, loosening something there that the cold had quietly tightened without your noticing. The air, you breathe it in now, slowly, all the way down. Fat parcels wrapped in brown paper sat beside slim envelopes tied in bundles with cotton twine. The knots simple, and precise. There were rolls of fresh brown paper stacked upright in a wooden bin at the base of one shelf, and beside them, coils of twine on wooden spools, each spool the same neat diameter. Books stood in rows, leather-bound ledgers, mostly, their spines labeled in careful handwriting, each label protected by a small rectangle of varnish. Between the books, objects, a letter opener with a handle of polished bone, a small brass magnifying glass on a stand, an ink bottle, sealed, its contents the dark blue-black of a winter sky, and letters. Letters everywhere, in their pigeonholes and on their shelves, and tucked into the gaps between things, patient and still, carrying within them all their invisible weight of meaning. The traveler looked at all of it and felt something settle inside. The way things settle when a place is so completely itself that it requires nothing from you in return. You could simply stand here and exist, and the room would go on being exactly what it was, and that would be entirely sufficient. The clock on the mantelpiece ticked. It was a mantel clock of the proper Victorian sort. Dark wood case with brass fittings, a white enamel face with Roman numerals, hands of blued steel. The tick it made was neither loud nor soft, but precisely what a tick ought to be. A clean, dry click, followed by the briefest of silences, followed by another clean, dry click. There was no variation in it. No hesitation, no hurry. Tick, tick, tick. The traveler became aware of having been listening to it for some time, without noticing. It had a quality that certain sounds have, a quality of dissolving into the background and simultaneously becoming the background, so that eventually the rhythm of it becomes the rhythm of the room. And then, if you are not careful, the rhythm of your own breathing. The fire in the corner crackled softly, not a dramatic crackling, no sparks, no sudden shifts, but the low, continuous small conversation of burning wood that has settled into its task and intends to continue with it indefinitely. The logs were beech and applewood, the postmaster would later mention, because applewood burned slow and sweet and left an ash that was almost white, clean and fine as powder. The light from the fire moved across the brass weighing scale on the counter. The scale was beautiful. It was the kind of scale found in very old post offices and apothecaries. A balance beam on a central post with two hanging pans of polished brass suspended on fine chains. It had been cleaned recently, or perhaps it was cleaned every evening as a matter of course, because the brass had that deep, warm glow that speaks of regular attention rather than occasional polish. The firelight moved across its surface in slow, liquid shifts, and the scale, if you watched it long enough, seemed to be breathing, the pans swaying almost imperceptibly with the air currents of the room, finding their balance again and again in small, peaceful adjustments. "Earl Grey, I think," said the postmaster, as if concluding a deliberation he had been conducting privately. "Unless you'd prefer something with apple in it. I have a cider on the hob that's been warming since before dark." "The cider?" said the traveler, without quite meaning to decide. The feet of it were dark wood, turned and sturdy. The back rose high, high enough to rest a head against, high enough to feel enclosed, held, cradled on three sides. Someone, at some point, had placed a small cushion against the inner curve of that high back, a cushion of dark patterned fabric, now soft and slightly flattened in the shape of heads that had rested there before. The chair sat not 3 feet from the face of the oven. The oven itself was a wall of brick, old brick, deep red-orange, its mortar worn gray and settled between the courses, like something that had grown rather than been built. It was vast. The arch of the main chamber mouth was dark and breathing, radiating a heat so pure and even and constant that it did not feel like heat from a fire, but heat from the earth itself, as though the stone had always been this warm, as though warmth was simply what stone was made of. The baker gestured at the chair. The traveler sat, and the chair received them the way only very old, very well-used chairs receive a person, with a kind of knowing accommodation, the cushioned surfaces finding and meeting the shapes they had been shaped by years of use to meet. The back of it was warm. The armrests were warm. The very depth of the cushion seemed to absorb the traveler, slowly, gently, like something soft, closing around an object, set carefully into it. The traveler exhaled. It was not a conscious exhalation. The body made the decision without asking. A long, slow release of breath that had been half held for hours. Through the cold miles and the wind-cut lanes and the long, dark walk, and was now simply, finally, let go. It left through the chest like something released from a great height, slow and gradual and easing. And when it was done, the chest felt wider than it had before, as though room had been made inside it for something easier. The baker had moved away. He disappeared somewhere behind the curve of the shelving, and for a moment there was only the sound of him. The soft step on the stone floor, a muffled sound of cloth, a faint metallic note from somewhere, and then the particular sound of liquid being poured, a warm, dark sound, low and steady and brief. He returned carrying a mug. It was a heavy thing, thick-walled pottery, the color of earth. Its handle broad enough for both hands if you wished. Steam rose from it in a slow, unhurried column that caught the amber light and dispersed into the warm air above. He held it out, and the traveler took it, and the mug's warmth transferred immediately to the palms and the curled fingers in the inner wrists, a warmth that was different from the oven's warmth, more personal, more direct, like something given rather than simply present. The smell reached upward, chamomile first, soft, familiar, carrying the memory of meadows and long summer light, and something deeply, primally restful. Beneath it, honey, real honey, stirred in generously, giving the steam a sweetness that was almost visible, and woven through both, so gently it was felt rather than identified. The faintest ghost of something spiced, not sharp, not insistent, just a warmth within the warmth, a depth beneath the depth, like a low note beneath a melody. The traveler wrapped both hands around the mug. The baker said nothing, simply moved away again, back toward his counter, back toward the dough, back toward the patient rhythmic work that the night required of him. The sound of him returned a moment later. The soft brush of flour on wood, unhurried, steady, the sound of a man entirely content with where he was and what he was doing, making no demands of the room, asking nothing of it except to remain exactly as it was. Then the blanket. The baker came once more from behind the shelves, this time carrying something folded over one arm, something thick and slightly rough textured and dark colored in the amber light. Wool. Dense, tightly woven wool, heavy enough to have substance in the hand, heavy enough that when the baker shook it open and settled it across the traveler's shoulders, it arrived with a weight that was immediate and intentional. A weight that pressed down across the upper back and the shoulder blades and the back of the arms, like a second pair of hands placed there with great gentleness. There, the baker said, just that. The traveler pulled the blanket forward with one hand, the mug held in the other, and drew it closed across the front. And the heat that had been gathering in the chair and the room and the very stones of the oven was now also trapped, held close, contained in the small warm pocket of air between the wool and the body. The cold had been retreating for some time, but this was the moment it finally conceded entirely. It did not go dramatically. It went the way the last light of evening goes, gradually and then completely, and in a way that was so smooth and so complete that it was difficult afterward to say exactly when the transition had occurred. One moment the cold was still present somewhere in the deep places, in the marrow, in the long bones of the legs, in the back of the neck where the wind had found it easiest to enter. And then it was simply not. The warmth had moved through those places, had moved with the unhurried confidence of something that knows it will win, and the cold had dissolved into it and was gone. The traveler felt it in layers. The hands first wrapped around the warm mug, the feeling returning to the fingertips in a slow tide, a soft tingling that was not quite sensation and not quite the absence of it, something in between, something on the gentle border between numb and alive. Then the forearms, the shoulders, the chest, a deep releasing of whatever the muscles had been holding, whatever braced and contracted arrangements they had made with the cold, all of it softening now, easing, sinking downward into the deep cushioned chair like something heavy put carefully to rest. The legs last, always the legs last, after a long cold walk, the thighs especially, the long muscles of them that had been working for hours and were now asked to do nothing at all, only to exist in the warmth and to let go. They did, slowly. The tiredness in them was not unpleasant. It was the tiredness of something used well, something that had carried its load faithfully and was now being thanked. The mug was warm against the palms. The traveler lifted it slowly with both hands and drank. The first sip moved down the throat in a warm line, honey sweet and soft, and the chamomile opened somewhere in the chest, some quality of it, some old botanical quiet that the body recognized without knowing why, the way the body sometimes recognizes things that happened before memory. The warmth of the liquid joined the warmth of the room and the warmth of the blanket, and they became indistinguishable from one another. All of it one continuous warmth. All of it surrounding and pervading and holding. The oven breathed. That was the only word for it. Breathed. The heat moved from it in slow, heavy waves, not pulsing quickly but rolling, the way deep water rolls, the way the tide moves, large, slow movements of warm air that reached the chair and the traveler in it and pressed gently, pressed and receded, and pressed again. Each wave arrived like a hand laid flat and warm against the face and held there briefly, and when it receded, it took something with it, some small remaining tension, some last held fragment of the cold night, and when the next wave came, there was less to take, and less and less. The eyelids grew heavy, not all at once. The weight came gradually, the way all the best things come, in increments too small to resist, each one reasonable on its own, accumulating without announcement into something large and gentle and irresistible. The amber light of the fire blurred softly at the edges. The sound of the baker's hands on the floured block moved further away, or seemed to, not disappearing, but becoming more like something dreamed than something heard. Still present, still steady, still the faithful heartbeat of the room. The mug rested against the chest. Both hands still held it, but loosely now, cradling rather than gripping, the warmth passing between the pottery and the palms in a slow, undemanding exchange. The blanket was very heavy, not uncomfortably so, heavily in the way of something that wants to help, that is pressing down not to constrain, but to reassure, to say, you are here, you are held. There is no need to hold yourself. The wool was slightly rough against the chin where it had been drawn up, and that small roughness was itself a comfort, a texture, a realness, evidence of the solidity of the world just at the moment when the world was beginning, very gently, to become less solid. The fire crackled once, a single, soft note like a word spoken in a language that had no other words, only that one, and that one was enough. The traveler's eyes closed, not with effort, not with decision, simply closed. The way a flower closes in the evening, not because it must, not from duty or exhaustion, but because the light has changed and the time for opening has passed, and there is nothing left to do now but rest, quietly and completely. Inside the warmth, the baker worked on. Press, turn, fold. The oven breathed. The snow fell on the lane outside, soft and silent and endlessly patient, covering the world in white. Let the warmth hold you now. Your hands are warm. Your shoulders are still. There is nothing here that needs you to be awake. Then, after a moment, the deeper sound of water being poured, and a smell that threaded itself through the lavender and rose and damp earth already filling the room. The warm, bergamot-edged scent of Earl Grey, and beneath it, lighter and softer, the dry sweetness of chamomile. She came back through the curtain, carrying a tray with the careful, practiced ease of someone who had carried many trays across many evenings. On it sat a brown teapot with a small chip on its lid and a worn cozy pulled over it, 2 cups of mismatched china, a small jug of milk, and a dish holding 2 pieces of shortbread wrapped in a square of cloth. She set it on the low surface near the stove, a cast iron thing tucked into the corner of the room, small and dark and gently radiating a heat that reached you from several feet away, a heat that settled against your face and hands like a kindness. Earl Grey, she said, pouring, with chamomile dried from last summer's garden. It's good for evenings that have gone on a long time. She handed you your cup without asking how you took it. And somehow, it was exactly right. Warm in your hands, not too strong, with just enough milk to soften its color to something between amber and gold. You wrapped both hands around it and held it. Close your eyes. Outside, the evening mist is curling around the cold iron of Whispering Gate, silencing the world. But step inside the old post office and leave the chill behind. Breathe in the comforting scent of wood smoke, sweet apple cider, and melting crimson wax. Listen to the heavy, soothing rustle of thick parchment and the slow, hypnotic ticking of the antique clock on the wall. Every letter is sorted. The day is done. You are safe here. Let the warmth settle over you. It is time to rest. Part 1. Arrival at Whispering Gate. The road had been long. Not long in any way that troubled the bones, though the bones had their own quiet complaints by now, but long in the way that all roads become long when the light begins to leave them. When the hedgerows lose their color and soften into silhouette, when the world narrows gently the way a river narrows before it finds its estuary, and everything around you seems to lean inward, pressing softly, the way a heavy blanket presses when you pull it up around your shoulders in the very first moments of evening. The traveler had come from somewhere far enough away that it no longer mattered where. Distance, by that hour, had dissolved. The journey was simply the journey, a series of slow turns, each one leading to the next with a kind of unhurried inevitability, like the pages of a book that turns itself. And then, through the mist, the gate appeared. It was wrought iron, old and dark and beautiful, set between two stone pillars that had stood long enough to gather their own small ecosystems of lichen and moss. Soft, gray-green cushions pressed into the crevices as if the stone itself had grown comfortable and settled in for the night. The gate was tall but not imposing. It had that quality that very old things sometimes carry, a kind of patient grandeur, worn smooth at the edges, that invites rather than warns. Across its arch, letters had been worked into the iron itself, curling, unhurried letters, the kind a craftsman makes when he is in no hurry and takes genuine pleasure in his work. Whispering Gate, they read, and beneath them, in smaller script, a phrase so faded as to be nearly invisible. All letters welcome here. The traveler paused before it. The gate was open, just slightly, just enough, and through the gap came a breath of air that carried something remarkable. Not a smell exactly, or not only a smell, something more diffuse than that. The scent of old stone and cool evening and damp earth. Yes, but beneath those things, something else entirely. The faint, sweet ghost of wood smoke, and beneath that, so subtle it might have been imagined, the clean, dry whisper of old paper. It was the scent, the traveler would later think, of a place that had been quietly minding its own business for a very long time. The village announced itself slowly. A cobblestone lane curved gently away from the gate, its stones worn smooth and slightly uneven underfoot, the kind of surface that asks you to pay attention, to feel each step. On either side, ancient trees stood close, oaks and elms whose roots had long ago lifted and resettled the cobblestones nearest their trunks, so that the lane seemed to breathe, to ripple, as if it were alive and sleeping. The trees were whispering. That is not a fanciful thing to say. The wind through Whispering Gate moved differently than wind moved elsewhere. Or perhaps it was simply that the leaves here were older and more numerous and arranged by decades of growth into something very like a natural instrument. Whatever the reason, the sound they made was extraordinary. A soft, continuous susurrus, not quite a rustle and not quite a sigh, but something in between. A sound that had no hard edges in it anywhere. A sound that seemed designed to slow the breath and still the mind. The traveler walked slowly, listening. A house here, a house there, curtains lit from within, warm amber pressing through the glass, a cat on a windowsill, watching with a calm authority that cats bring to observation. A wreath of dried herbs above a door, a garden gate latched with something climbing over it in happy disorder. Climbing roses, perhaps, though in the twilight it was difficult to say. The village was small, and in its smallness, it was complete. From somewhere behind and above, from the direction of the main lane it seemed, though the mist made direction uncertain, came a sound, low and rhythmic, growing gradually, then peaking, then receding, the sound of hooves on cobblestone. The traveler stopped. Through the mist, a shape resolved. A horse-drawn mail carriage, moving at a steady walk, its lamps lit and swinging softly with each step of the horse. It was a beautiful thing. Dark lacquered wood, iron-rimmed wheels turning with a low hum over the stones, a stack of leather satchels roped to the luggage board at the back. The horse was a gray, heavy-set and calm, its breath coming in slow plumes in the cool air. The driver sat high on the box, bundled in a coat of dark wool, a hat pulled low. He did not hurry. He did not need to. The horse knew its route, and the route was the route it had always been, and there was no urgency in any of it. The carriage passed. The sound of hooves faded into the mist. Slow, slow, slower, like the ticking of a clock winding down, until there was nothing left of it but the echo. And then not even that, just the trees again, whispering, just the cool air, just the soft, damp quiet of a village settling into evening. And then the traveler saw the light. It fell from a window, not a large window, but a generous one, its glass slightly uneven in the way of old glass, so that the light that came through it moved a little, shimmered a little, as if alive. The light was amber, not yellow, not orange, but that particular amber that comes from oil lamps with good wicks and warm glass, a color that seems to contain within it some memory of fire and warmth and long evenings indoors. It fell onto the cobblestones in a long, soft rectangle, and the damp stones caught it and held it, gleaming. Above the door, a sign hung from a short iron bracket, swinging very gently in the evening air. The sign was wooden, old wood, painted and repainted many times over, so that the layers showed at the edges, and upon it, in careful gold lettering that had faded just enough to feel entirely right, were the words Whispering Gate Post Office, and below that, Est, 1847. The sign swung. It made no sound. The traveler stood for a moment on the cobblestones, looking at the door. It was a good door, a proper door, with a brass handle worn smooth by generations of hands, and a small window in its upper half through which the amber light fell in a warm rectangle onto the step outside. The step itself was stone, slightly hollowed in the center from long use, and that hollow seemed to the traveler perhaps fanciful, perhaps not, like a kind of welcome, like the place where welcome lives, worn into the world by repetition. A breath, a step forward. The door opened with a sound that was barely a sound at all, just the soft compression of warm air against cool, the faint whisper of old hinges, the quietest possible announcement of an arrival. Inside, the world changed. It changed slowly, the way warmth changes things. Gradually, from the outside in, the cold of the evening fell away first from the face, then from the hands, then from the chest, until the whole body had adjusted and settled into the ambient warmth of the room the way a stone settles into riverbed. The room was not large, but it was full. Floor to ceiling on the left-hand wall ran wooden pigeonholes, dozens of them, perhaps hundreds, arranged in a grid so precise and yet so gently aged that they seemed to have grown there rather than been constructed. Each pigeonhole was a small dark square of shadow, and in each shadow nested letters, folded paper and sealed envelopes, fat parcels and thin notes, everything waiting with the particular patience of correspondence. On the right, shelves bore their own orderly burdens. Leather-bound books with labels on their spines, stacks of brown parcel paper tied with twine, brass instruments of measurement and impression, bottles of ink in dark glass, a set of scales, a rack of rubber stamps, everything in its place, everything tended. The scent of the room was extraordinary. It was the smell of old paper, not musty, not stale, but rich and dry, the way antique bookshops smell, the way the inside of a cedar chest smells, with something deeper beneath it, leather, much used and well-conditioned. Wood smoke from the small fireplace in the corner, where a fire had been going long enough to have settled into contentment, and something else, fainter. That might have been wax, or might have been ink, or might simply have been the accumulated history of 1,000 letters passing through this room. Over more than a century, the traveler breathed it in. Behind the long wooden counter, bent over a stack of envelopes, arranged in careful rows, was a man. He was elderly, not frail, but properly old, the kind of old that carries its weight easily, that has learned over many decades not to hurry and has found that unhurrying suits it well. He wore a woolen vest over a white shirt, the vest a rich navy with small buttons that caught the lamplight. His spectacles sat slightly low on his nose, not slipping, but settled there as if they had found their position long ago and saw no reason to move. His hair was white and combed, his hands steady and precise over the envelopes. He was sorting. Not quickly. There was no speed in what he did, only accuracy. He would take an envelope from the stack, hold it a moment, read the address with the attention of someone who genuinely cared where it was going, and then place it with soft finality into the correct pigeonhole behind him. The sound this made, the dry whisper of paper against wood, was repeated every few seconds, steadily, like the clicking of the clock on the mantelpiece. Above the fire, he looked up. His eyes behind the spectacles were a warm gray blue, the color of the sky on a morning when the weather cannot quite decide. They carried without effort the unmistakable expression of a person who is genuinely glad to see another person. "Ah," he said, "just that." Quietly, as if the traveler's arrival had been not unexpected, not exactly, but simply right, as if the evening had been waiting for this moment and was now settling into its proper shape. "You'll have come a long way," he said. It was not quite a question. "I have," said the traveler. The postmaster nodded, the way people nod when a thing confirms what they already suspected, and set down his envelope with the same careful deliberateness with which he had been handling all the others. "Well," he said, "you're here